Crazy. Hey guys.
Hi, Manu.
Hey.
Thanks for coming.
You two downstairs. What was your name again? Isif. Yeah, cool name. And your name? Iman. Nice to see you both. Hey. Okay. Are we doing this in any kind of certain way, or is it?
No, thank you.
Am I meant to tell jokes?
On last season on Arrow towards the end, I remember seeing on Twitter you posted a picture saying this is not me filming.
Yeah.
Was that a troll or was it genuinely
No. What happened was, that there was an ongoing discussion about coming back to Arrow, and before that discussion had even eventuated, before even a contract had been signed, my colleague, Mr. Amell, stated something online, and it just wasn't appropriate at the time, So I mean, I basically owned my own position, which I have every right to do, and responded as such to really sort of just put off the notion that I was back on the show. And I also thought that I hate it when social media starts ruining the surprise. There's just so much. The moment that I got out of the into the terminal at Vancouver Airport, there was some guy called Vancouver Snaps or something, like chasing me around with a camera, But funnily enough, just as I was leaving Auckland Airport in New Zealand, I'd seen this hoodie, this hooded jacket, for an All Blacks one, funnily enough, which they should have blown it all together, because it would have been like, who's the guy with the All Blacks jersey on? But so as I went out of the terminal, I put this hood on, and I raced past these guys with cameras, and they were all trying to take photos. And in the end, they took one photo, and I looked like Bigfoot. All you could see was the beard hanging out of the bottom of the hood, and they never got a straight shot, which was so cool. And so it all fueled to the kind of like, I don't know, to help keep, as far as I was concerned, it was about help keeping the surprise active, so that viewers could enjoy it when it happened, rather than just reading it on some tweet,
I was surprised as a result of that, because I read it and I was like, oh, so it's going to be somebody else in the costume, and then when I saw you in the episode. Oh,
absolutely! Look, I went to every means possible. I wrote stuff that was adverse to a lot of situations, but in the end, Mark Guggenheim really played along with it with me, and in the end we were kind of like laughing at each other at how effective it ended up being. There'd been these outward claims by both CW and Stephen and Mark that I was coming back on the show, and yet we managed to sort of create some kind of ambiguity, and people going, is he, aren't they? No, he couldn't be saying that about them, all this sort of stuff. So it was a bit of a WWE kind of thing, really.
Just following on from that, how's it been for you to be back on the show?
Oh, look, the future of Deathstroke has always been kind of like this I don't know, roller coaster ride between Warner Brothers and their intentions with the character in the film world. Obviously now there's been the announcement of, I think really, we on the Arrow CW show really brought Deathstroke back to life, and that came down to some great writing from Mark Guggenheim, and it's a popular character again, and I've loved over the years meeting with Marv Wolfman. Marv Wolfman came up to me at a convention, and he just leaned over the railing and he went, like with his face, he went, good stuff. And I was like, oh, hey mate, thank you, thanks. And then somebody said, that was Marv Wolfman, the guy who created the character. And I jumped over this table and almost sort of fell into everybody's arms and ran across and grabbed Marv Wolfman, because the reason why I did was because I'd run into George Perez, who illustrated the very first drawing of Deathstroke on the Teen Titans cover. And when I'd met him, I met him in somewhere in Canada, and I'd walked up to him and I'd said, "Oh, hi, Mr. Perez. I'm Manu, and I've just been cast to play Slade Wilson on Arrow." And George Perez turned around to me and he said, "You don't look anything like him." I was like, "What?" And he went, "You can't play." He did this whole thing, and I sort of chased him around for the rest of the day, going, "Mr. Perez, please tell me why you think I don't." And he goes, "Well, he's older than you. You know, he's got grey hair." And I said, "Yeah, but they're going to paint grey hair into me." And he went, "No, yeah, but you're not. It's not going to." And he did this whole thing, and he like really blew me away, because I was like, you know, being told by the guy who drew Deathstroke that I could never be Deathstroke. And I remember even leaving that convention, and George Perez got in because we were both all staying at the same hotel, and he got into a car, and I jumped into the back seat of the car next to him, and I went, "Oh, hi, Mr. Perez, it's me again. Why don't you think I can be Deathstroke?" And it was just funny, and he was very, very adamant about it. He just really, when he looked at me, he didn't see Deathstroke. And then this time that I saw George Perez, you know, and then I ran after him. I ran after him because I sort of wanted to find some kind of vindication, or some kind of, you know, like, what did the guy who wrote, you know, the guy who drew Deathstroke never thought I looked like Deathstroke. Did the guy who wrote Deathstroke think that I'd, you know, pulled off, you know, something of a success with the character? And you know, Marv was like incredibly complimentary. You know, he said that, you know, all the grey stuff, all the grey matter, and that's what I think is really important about Deathstroke. And that's the wonderful thing about television, is that, you know, we have so much time to flesh out the character over so many episodes. You know, I like to pace my characters. You know, I like to set them in one tone and move in that tone and capture the audience in a certain way, and then sort of, you know, usually I'll be working with a notion of when the twist is going to come. Then I'll get to that moment, but then once I've got to that moment, I've humanized the character. So therefore, that any flaws that you make have to be taken into consideration of the human quality of the character. And that's what we tend to forget about in society. You know, once the headlines start running, you know, people are condemned and turned into demons and all this sort of stuff. But really, you don't really know people, and you don't really know their circumstances. But, you know, on a TV show, when you get to flesh all of this out, and I did the same with Crixus, you know, in Spartacus, you know, you get to create a human being that people can see inside the soul of, if you offer your soul up, you know, and that's what I tried to do with both characters. And, you know, that grey matter is something that I believe has worked well on the television show, because we've had so much time to mix with it. You know, in that regard, it's going to be interesting now that they're doing the film, you know, just how much of Slade Wilson's character can be read in 90 minutes. You know, not saying that it's not possible, but, and you know, obviously they're going to have a bigger spend on all the visual effects and all that sort of stuff. And Joe Manganiello, you know, I've met Joe a couple of times, and he's just a wonderful, wonderful guy, you know, and he's incredibly well built, and he'll fit a superhero costume, you know, maybe better than anybody. Because he is that, what's that ratio? 1 head to 10 heads make up the body or something. He's got that kind of, you know, physique. So, you know, I think he's you know, he's well and capable of doing a wonderful Slade Wilson, and I wish him all the very best. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, I've had a wonderful opportunity to do the character, but, you know, at the end of the day, Ron Perlman voiced him, you know, in another gig, and you know, like Batman, you know, so many actors have gotten to play the character that, you know, it's Joe's turn. Go Joe, you know. I hope he does very well.
Manu, Liam Hall has been cast as your son for season 6.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can tease about that? Is there going to be a late Wilson adventure with in Arrow?
Yeah, you know, Mark Guggenheim has been, you know, fairly, you know, honest with me about the way that, you know, he's been constrained, you might say, in terms of how to include Deathstroke, you know, in the Arrow series. You know, Warner Brothers adult company, you know, for the film branch, have made it not possible to use certain characters on the Arrow TV show. The Suicide Squad, Harley Quinn, all these characters have been, you know, they'd passed a prison cell on one episode of Arrow, and Harley Quinn was inside there. You know, and you had Deadshot, and you had all these other characters that could have been fleshed out more, you know, Warner Brothers parent company had said, oh, you know, we're going to use them in the films, and you know, so therefore you got to step back off using them in the TV series, which is kind of like a shame, but you know, part of, you know, who am I to say, you know, I mean, that's at the end of the day their property, and they've got to treat it in the way that they think is best in order to make the impact, you know. But you know, it is the way it is. But you know, television, you know, with the possibilities of television, you know, Mark Guggenheim and I talked about a Deathstroke TV series, you know, and it would be awesom. You know, I mean, if we could make it R-rated, you know, if we could maybe leap onto something, another network platform that we could be at that level, you know, make it Logan-esque and all that sort of stuff. Then you know, we can do it. I mean, you know, Mark Guggenheim and I could write that series, but you know, it's not really it's not our property to say. But you know, I know the fan base out there would be keen for it. But you know, at the end of the day, who am I, man? I'm just a small guy from New Zealand.
Manu, going off from there, if like in anyone in the DC universe, if you did get to be Deathstroke, would there be another superhero or villain you would love to have played, or still would love to play now on TV or film?
You know what, I have no expectations at all. You know, I think I've had some really great characters to play in my run as an actor so far. You know, I've been in the TV realm for quite some time, and I, as I say, I enjoy that realm because you know, you have this long period of time to make characters work. You know, where to from today is kind of like a question. You know, I just did this really wonderful 2 episodes with Liam Hall, who's playing my son, you know, Slade Wilson's son on Arrow. So we have this wonderful episode 5 and 6 of season 6 of Arrow, which is a whole new dimension. You know, it was so challenging on so many ways to play this new Slade Wilson. And I think the audience is going to be both surprised and interested and hopefully satisfied by the way that Mark Guggenheim wrote this compelling 2-episode, you know, part of this next season of Arrow. Liam Hall, it was interesting. Liam and I met, and of course very quickly you have to try to form a bond, because you know, we met with maybe 48 hours before the camera was going to start rolling. And him and I got together in a hotel room, and we started, as you do, acting beside each other, you know, and he's a young actor, so therefore, and you know, he's seen all my stuff, so I could tell he was a little bit intimidated, you know, he'd seen my Crixus, and you know, he was a huge fan of Arrow, and suddenly he'd come out of obscurity. He'd been living in Vancouver for 2 years as a young Australian actor trying to find a break, and he hadn't really landed anything, so he'd had no real experience in the big game, you know what I mean? And he sort of, as we sat in the hotel room, I could figure some, because I've been through that, you know, so I could figure where he was at on some of his, you know, personal kind of, you know, emotional limitations at the time, just because I've been in that situation where you're nervous, you know, and you got to sort of just get rid of those nerves and start being kind of like tactile with your fellow actor. So Liam and I actually just sat there and we did Meisner. We sat there and we looked at each other, and we started saying the lines while we were studying each other as people, trying to notice from each other what we could see about each other more deeply in each other's eyes, read the connection, you know, and we actually applied that when it came to our first scene, and it worked so well, you know, without making that kind of really, see, you got such a short amount of time to get ready with it in this scenario that unless you're really connected to people, you know, unless you can really get that connection in there, then you're going to tell if they're father or son or not, or whether they're just acting father or son, right? And after 48 hours of doing this kind of Meisner thing that we did together, you know, we got really, really, you know, connected in a way that, you know, I think the fans are going to find this very interesting, because, you know, there was Slade and Oliver on the island, right, which everybody bought into. They bought into that bond, but Slade had his own son. Has got a whole different variation of vulnerabilities, you know, responsibilities, fears that you're losing control of a child of your own, you know. And I was so happy at the end, you know. And so were the directors, the two directors that worked the two episodes, you know. They were so happy, and we worked so hard to make it something wonderful. And Mark Guggenheim kind of like opened up the doors to so much more. And I can't give you any spoilers on that, but honestly, the way that these two episodes open a door is interesting, you know. There's potential future. What up, kid? I heard that question coming out.
We've been, you know, you've been talking about your son and everything with Deathstroke. Deathstroke has been.
You got to come up here and ask me this question from up here. You got to be on camera. Come here. This kid is the cool. You're the coolest interviewer I've ever met. Come on, kid. Yeah.
We've been hearing about Deathstroke and everything he's been doing. He's been a prominent character on Arrow, and we're finally getting like a big expansion for him. You know, we're gonna get his origin, everything. You know, how Deathstroke became Deathstroke. How do you feel about that? What, you know? I know you said it's an honor and everything, but it's like it's something, you know, you don't get to experience every day. So what were you feeling like when you heard about that for the first time?
Yeah, I think you need to sort of be a little bit cautious about the origin story. You know, whether the origin story, because you know a lot of people are aware of the military background of Stanikin. They're really aware of the military background of Slade Wilson and the CW. In the CW. The comic book series, right? In the DC comic book series, right? There's a comic book series that everybody read when they were kids or whatever and grew up with, and that's why they like Deathstroke. So the CW version of this is, you know, we're not exactly on the same page or the same time frame as what the comic book origin story is. So when Mark Guggenheim has said we're going to discover the origin of Deathstroke, he's talking about a different origin, you know, kind of like Shadow was a different. Like if you wanted to look at the origin story of Slade on Arrow, the TV show, then Shadow's a big part of that. But she wasn't really the component of the DC world. So yeah, so this origin story is more about Slade and his son. I think you kind of have to keep that in perspective. Yeah. But was it amazing? Yeah, it was such a new spin. You know, I mean, I like to characterize through experience. So therefore, you know, me being a father, and the reason you're standing up here is because I think it's really cool that you're a young kid and you know you're stepping up and doing this. It was interesting to play a fatherly kind of presentation, you know, of Slade, because I knew where, you know, there's a completely different realm to just Slade with Oliver on the island, you know. And I think where I got forced to go because of this real father and a son scenario was new territory. Yeah, hope you enjoy it. Yeah.
I'm really excited for it.
Hey, nice to meet you, kid.
On that note, we're going to have to let you go.
Oh, really? Why don't these kids had a question? Yes, the kids get to ask questions.
What do you think of Diggle's Green Arrow?
What do I think of what, sorry?
Diggle's Green Arrow. To all of us.
I didn't watch the episode. But I'm sure he did a good job. No. Yeah. He's like, you know, he's like super strong. He's like a real martial artist in the real world.
David Ramsey.
Yeah, if you walked up to if anybody walked up to David Ramsey and gave him he could flip you over and choke you out and break every bone in your body in a split second. David Ramsey is a machine. Like if anybody's a real machine, like I remember on Spartacus, we had this one guy called Raicho, and Raicho's a Bulgarian stunt guy, actor. But he's the real deal. Like you just never like would mess with Raicho. And he played Neus, a character called Neus in Spartacus. But we always used to go, well, he's the real Spartacus. And plus Spartacus came from somewhere around Bulgaria or Romania or something. So he actually had the right blood and everything. But like, you know, if you want to have a real, like a badass, like a real sort of potential superhero kind of physical guy, it's David Ramsey. He's physically pretty astute. And little darling, you want to ask a question?
Have you got a son in Arrow? Do you feel that your character's gonna like change a lot? Because before you had a son, he was really he was like one of the bad guys. You didn't want to like mess with him. But now he's got a son. Like, do you think he's gonna be a bit more vulnerable than he was before he had a son?
Awesome question. Listen, I mean, you know, the thing about Slade prior to season 6 is that, you know, you sort of had a first season where Slade came in and was kind of like, you know, a mentor to Oliver and a friend. I mean, a real true friend, you know. And there was a couple of holes that came up in the storyline that were created for drama, and that's the fact that, you know, Oliver gave Slade his first shot of Mirakuru, which is kind of like a bit of a story hole. You know, when it ends up being like Speedy, you know, what's his name, Speedy, started you know, freaking out of Mirakuru, and they're going like,
Yeah.
you know, and they're going like, Roy, yeah, and they're like, Roy's a good person. It was only the Mirakuru. He's a good person. But they kind of like didn't write that same storyline for Slade, you know. But Slade was the good person one time, and then Oliver gave him the Mirakuru. A couple of little holes. I'm just not going to elaborate on them, but there you go. And I think the audience remained in a way with Slade, because what Slade saw was like Shadow get killed, and he was kind of like, you know, I remember sort of like we'd already shot a few scenes with the Shadow character, and one of the, I think Batman's going to jump off the bridge. Don't jump! It's okay. The movie still might be made.